Let's look at another practical example for using the display property. In this situation here, we want to create a horizontal navigation. So generally when we're doing navigation, we use a list. That's the most appropriate element for navigation most of the time. So let's go to my HTML here, and I'm going to create the HTML we need for the navigation. So we want a list, an unordered list here, and then each of these things will be li elements. And in them will be a elements, because this is navigation, we want to be able to click. All right. So here's my navigation. You can see that by default, list elements behave like display block elements. So they're all each on their own line. So if we wanted to get those beside each other, we would probably want to change them from display block to something else. So let's target my nav.ul first. I want to get rid of those bullets. All right, no bullets. And I might as well get rid of the margin and padding when I'm in here. All right, so what I do want to target is the nav LIs. So by default, right now in the browser, they're behaving like block level elements. So I don't want them to be block level elements. I want them to be something like an inline level element. So I can go display inline like this. Now if I go look in the browser, you can see they are now beside each other. So I've switched them from block to inline level elements. And when they're in line, they can fit beside each other on the page. The next thing I want to do is, if we look in Photoshop here, I want to style up these elements themselves. So you can see that they kind of have a width on them. Each of the buttons are the same length, independent of how wide the text is. So that would mean to me that I couldn't use an inline level element for those. I'd have to use an inline block level element or something like that. So if I'm targeting my nav A elements, I want to put the width onto them. So I'm going to set them to display inline block. So that allows me to put a width on them. Just going to guess here of 6M. And I want a padding on them. And let's put the background color. All right, so there we go. Now you can see that the navigation items are the same width, and that's because I've set them to display inline block. If I didn't have this display inline block right here, you could see they don't actually maintain the width. So the display inline block on the A elements is allowing me to put the width on them. And also it gives me a little bit more control over padding and stuff like that, and it looks a little bit better. So let's just go through here and fix the rest of the things we need. So we want to change the color, and we don't want a underline. All right. And we want them to be centered, text align center. And then I think the last thing we want is the font in here is a sans serif font. So let's change to that. There we go. That is very similar to the navigation that we have in here. So by doing what we did there is, again, we use the display and the flow to our advantage. In this situation, the LI elements by default are like block, so we set them to display in line to get them beside each other. And by default, A elements are in line, so we set them to display inline block so that our width property would actually work on them.